So now that we have the first weekend of Battlefield 2042's early access behind us, it's safe to say that we as a community are starting to get a feel for how the flow of the game works, everything from gameplay to progression, which is a big thing I want to focus on today, progression, because it's something that's been quite a staple of the Battlefield franchise for a long time now, and I know that many love getting their teeth sunk into Battlefield games just to unlock a whole bunch of cool stuff to use in the sandbox of the game. So, g'day there once again viewers, this is your mate Kamikaze78 here, and today, let's talk about Battlefield 2042's progression offering and what it means for the state of the game right now at launch. Now, in order to have a good amount of progression and a meaningful set of progression in a game like this, you need a solid amount of source content to base that progression around. And while in first-person shooter games, a lot of progression is based around the weaponry and the vehicles that you're going to be using in your battles in-game. That has very much been a staple of the Battlefield franchise for a long time now, which is where we move into the meat and potatoes of this video. There's absolutely no denying that this game is very short on the weaponry side of things. There are currently only 22 weapons available to use in 2042's all-out warfare mode. This is made up of 3 sidearms, 4 SMGs, 4 assault rifles, only 2 light machine guns, 3 marksman rifles, 3 sniper rifles, and 3 additional utility weapons, which is sort of made up of 2 shotguns and a lever action rifle. Now, to the game's credit, and I'm kind of thankful that this is the case, each of the weapons that are in the game right now currently do feel pretty unique and offer different attachment options, playstyles, benefits, and drawbacks that make them worth using on their own merit. There isn't a lot of overlap in the weapon design, and part of me is extremely thankful that is the case. For example, the AK-24 and the M5A3 play incredibly differently from one another, and their attachment options and how you can sort of further fine-tune the weapons into certain situations reflect that as well. The same applies to the DM7 and the SVK marksman rifles. These weapons are night and day by comparison to how they play, and I appreciate that said weapons do feel different. It does keep the gameplay fresh where it can between these weapon experiences, and it does let you sort of switch out between distinct playstyles and approaches to the game sandbox when you feel the need to do so. And I've always been an advocate for not adding content for the sake of just adding more content to grind out. You know, in the world of weaponry, of first-person shooter games, and the progression that's based around that weaponry, if I unlock a weapon in a game and it feels like a carbon copy of something that I already have gotten in the past, I feel like I've wasted my time. And so far, Battlefield 2042 hasn't fallen into that trap. And that is good news, because I don't think I could forgive the game if it did fall into that trap with this little amount of weaponry in the game at launch. But here's the thing. When you compare it against the 11 assault rifles, 9 PDWs, 9 LMGs, 9 sniper rifles, 10 carbines, 8 DMRs, 8 shotguns, and 12 sidearms, making a total of 67 weapons across the board that launched for Battlefield 4, you know, when you stack things up like that, it does sound a bit crazy as to how vast the contrast is here. And I'll be honest, when the news started to circulate that this was the weaponry selection in the game at launch, I was a bit taken back by that. I still am, to be honest. You know, I still look at the weaponry selection from time to time when I'm playing and I go, oh, that's it. And being completely honest, it's starting to have its effects on the gameplay for me already. I do find that I am using the same old weapons over and over again, and the only thing that is changing in my weaponry loadouts are the attachments that I use as I unlock them. And it is clear that DICE here this time around have aimed to supplement the weaponry selection by offering more in-depth customization options on the individual weapons that let you tune them to different playstyles. I mean, we've never really had in a previous Battlefield game the ability to change out the barrel length on a certain weapon, thus affecting drastically what kind of damage profile, fire rate, and effective range it has. You know, in previous Battlefield games, there was a weapon, it had a set role, and that's what you used it for. If you wanted a different role, you would change weapon entirely. So it's clear that DICE have gone for a more adaptable approach for each weapon in the game as it stands right now. And the default assault rifle, the M5A3, is a great example of that. It's a weapon that I can now pretty easily adapt into something for CQC, long range, and general all-round combat focused at the drop of a hat with the attachment options I have unlocked for it. And I feel as though I have some pretty consistent success with that weapon now as a result in a lot of scenarios that the game throws at me. However, there's also really no denying that the customization system for weapons here doesn't quite match that of, say, Call of Duty's almost revolutionary gunsmith system, which lets you completely change some weapons into different guns entirely. And this is why I feel Modern Warfare 2019 in particular got away with launching with less weapons in the base game than it did by comparison to other previous Modern Warfare titles, because you could completely change weapons into something totally new. The AK-47, for example, could become the AK-74U, it could become an RPK, an AK-12, you name it. But in this game, the changes are comparatively pretty minuscule, you're just adjusting the characteristics of the core weapon. So in turn, the weapon variety in the game can feel a little limited at times in the grand scheme of things. Right now, the game sports just enough weapons in each category, and then just enough attachments on top of that to cover all bases for all playstyles, and it kind of calls it a day there. You know, in Battlefield 4, we had multiple weapons that approached the same playstyle in different ways. And while I'm not expecting to see 12 versions of the same pump-action shotgun mechanic here, I'm kind of glad that's not the case this time around, there are more ways to approach a CQC design for an assault rifle or a long-range design for a light machine gun, and I feel as though that hasn't really been explored that much with the weaponry that we have on offer in the game currently. And as a result, this is kind of the grindiest Battlefield game that we've had for a long time when it comes to progression. I feel like I'm unlocking things at a much slower pace than what I did in previous Battlefield games, and I've got to say that my gut feeling tells me that this game's progression has been slowed down a touch by comparison to previous titles on purpose to ensure players don't unlock everything too quickly. I remember in Battlefield 4, I would be unlocking things at a breakneck pace, so much so to the point where I simply would have more weapons to play with than I would know what to do with, and it was a constant experimentation process in the early game. And there's admittedly a lot less of that in Battlefield 2042. I find myself unlocking a new gun, and then I spend a lot of time with that gun in-game, matches at a time, grinding out attachments and seeing what I can do with it to make it the most efficient killing machine I possibly can. And does this make the game feel a bit more repetitive by comparison to previous entries? Yeah, kind of a little bit. And if you're an absolute gun nut who loves huge weapon varieties and being able to, switch between different weapons that handle different situations differently depending on the mood you're feeling for that day, chances are you're going to feel a little disappointed by the offering of Battlefield 2042's weapon layout. In addition to that, the vehicle progression also feels incredibly slow, and this is combined by the fact that faction-specific vehicles like the attack helicopters, MBTs, and jets each seem to have their own progression lines. So if you get a good run in a T-28, the things you unlock in that good run won't be available on your M1A5, so if you play the United States side after unlocking a lot of things for the Russian tank, then you'll have to do the same thing all over again just to get back to a net zero. So it kind of feels as though the progression on that front for vehicles has also been slowed down a bit artificially to make up for potentially a lacking amount of customization options. It's clear that DICE this time around are taking a very different approach when it comes to customization and progression in this game, which could very well be a little bit less attractive to some players out there by comparison to the methods that previous Battlefield titles have used. And I'm making this video here today to make people aware of how that has affected the experience, because there are some people who I know aren't going to like this very much. And for those kinds of players, well, this game may then feel like a bit of a letdown at launch as it currently stands. So it might be worth waiting 6 months or so for more items and more weapons to get added to the game through the ongoing seasonal content that the developers are going to be adding, because then the progression will be more, well, fleshed out. There'll be more for you to unlock and more weapons for you to experiment with. As we said in my last video, discussing my first impressions of the game as a whole, I still think that the core experience, the core gameplay loop here is incredibly satisfying and a lot of fun to get into. So if progression is something that bothers you a little bit less, then, well, you'll still enjoy this game at launch, I feel. I just felt as though I had to make this video because, again, progression has been such a cornerstone of Battlefield games in the past, and this is a very different approach that DICE have taken this time around, one that may take quite a few people off guard as they get into the game, and I feel as though it's my duty as a content creator to flag these things for you guys so that you can make informed decisions as a consumer as to when you think the right time is for you to invest into this game. As it stands right now, I think the weaponry selection we have now is sort of just enough to get us by and is enough to offer a varied amount of gameplay experiences, but it will feel pretty slow by comparison to other titles, and I do look forward to seeing how the developers continue to add to the content and to the amount of gear that we have available to us as the seasons continue to roll around. But that is everything I wanted to talk about in today's video, guys. As I said before, I'm having a lot of fun still with this game, but this is a bit of a pain point for me, and I know it will be for a bunch of other people, so hence this video exists. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to back in the like button. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think of Battlefield 2042's weaponry options. Do you think there's enough? Do you think there's not enough? Do you think there's too much? Let me know what your thoughts are down below. If you're new to the channel, well, consider subscribing. It keeps you up to date with all of our video releases, which I promise you, a lot of good stuff is coming very, very soon. And if you're a long-term subscriber and you want to support the channel further, consider a channel membership. Also goes a long way to helping me out, guys, produce content more regularly. Once again, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. Peace out, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Take care, guys. Have a good one.